carried. Thank you. Item 9, because I want to do 9 because we've got the same team plus, and then we'll move into the extraordinary business, item 15. So I'll move it in the instance. Second. Councillor Mulholland, and so it's been moved and seconded and on the table for comment and introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora koutou. My name's Christine Olsen and I'm the manager of the Community Empowerment Unit. I will take the report as read, and just to give you a brief summary, the Regional Community Development Grant, we only do one a year because it's so oversubscribed that it would be a waste of the community's time and effort if we were to do two. So this is the first round for this year, but the priorities were decided by the previous Community Development and Safety Committee. This year we had 57 applications and the amount of money that was applied for was 1.6 million. That was an increase of 200,000 from last year. We're recommending funding for 13 projects. Most of those projects are partial funding, but we do quite a lot of work to look at how do we make that viable. So sometimes it is we fund a particular aspect of the project, or we'll work with the group to look at how is what we're giving them going to make it viable. Just, sorry, to pick up on some of the comments from the previous grant, the grants are promoted widely. We have a strategic broker in every local board, and we also have a number of other staff that work across Auckland, and have a lot of connection with community groups, so they are promoting it strongly through them and advertising as well. And they do provide, particularly the strategic brokers, do provide quite a lot of support. So they don't sit with the group and help them fill in their application, but they do provide a lot of support to how to make their application successful. We also have, my equivalent of David Burt was Paul Prestige, who retired at the end of last year, but so he was involved in getting us to the point that we are today with this round of grants. So he is our subject matter expert for regional community development grants, and he works very closely with applicants, helping them, or people that are interested. So we always offer that they can get in touch with him. He'll go out and visit, work with them, and help them to structure their application. As Catherine said, we had a real priority with this round on social inclusion and diversity, and looking at interculturalism. So how do we bring different cultures together, and youth. So this year we're proposing one strategic partnership grant of 3 years. So when we strategic relationship grants. So strategic relationship grants, what the policy outlines is that these are for key capacity building organisations in a particular sector who are cornerstone providers and have strong relationships with council. So we're proposing that for Belong Aotearoa, who used to be Auckland Refugee and Migrant Services, ARMS. They've changed their name. So every year that this grant has existed, we've funded them, and they are definitely a cornerstone provider in the refugee and migrant community and have a very strong relationship with us. So by offering them a strategic relationship grant over 3 years, it just gives them more certainty in terms of their planning and their relationship with us. I think that's all I have to say. Open to questions.
Yeah, so questions and then comments afterwards. So questions. Matua Kake and then Councillor Walker.
Kia ora. First thing, really just a comment, really. I support the 3-year commitment to this organisation. I probably have to declare my conflict of interest. I was a foundation member of the Auckland when it first started, probably about 100 years ago. So awesome to see that they're still going. So of course I'm going to support the 3 years. So I don't have that conflict anymore because I'm no longer a trustee. And I just wanted to say the Rua Pōtaka Marae Society Incorporated, what they've been doing, all marae provide that role. And I'm really glad to see it being supported in this way. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
So that was a comment, but we'll go.
I'll turn that into a question. Do you agree?
Yes.
It's a great project.
Okay, Councillor Walker.
A couple of things. And yes, I've had a look at these grants. Just a question I've got, and it goes to what's happening across the environmental space across Auckland, especially as it goes to pest control, revegetation, all of that. So increasingly, there's a process where sub-regional groups are encouraged to get together because there's an opportunity for them to share common templates, to be more efficient, to share tools. They're often working in similar spaces. And increasingly, they're being encouraged to also give some thought between themselves as to grant applications and so on. And it's very successful. It's been led in the north, but increasingly it's occurring in the south and the like. As much and all as community development is a little different, many of the principles are the same. It's very efficient in terms of officers. We also support this structure increasingly financially. So I just want to put to you whether it's possible for us to consider that sort of approach across this area, and what sort of interaction there is amongst many of these organisations that I would suggest often have quite a lot of overlap. So that's my first question.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we absolutely support groups collaborating together and joint applications. In fact, in terms of our assessment matrix, they would get additional points for that. Outside of this grant, we, within the Community Empowerment Unit, we do some strategic relationship. We have some money to build strategic relationships, and we're absolutely looking at what we call anchor organisations across the region in different sectors, and how we can work with them to support them to be working with other organisations, developing their capacity.
The other question I've got really just goes to the issues I raised in the last item around the importance of stability, continuity, certainty, and the like. I mean, it's great to have one-offs, but given the amount of effort required to get various programs and the like up and running, you really want to have that going. Quite obviously, we've picked a winner in respect of the Aotearoa organisation. Is this something that we're factoring in with these other applications as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, absolutely. So we look really hard at kind of getting a balance of opportunity for new stuff, new projects, new initiatives, and sustaining stuff. So we particularly with this grant look at, I guess, seed funding. So often we will, it's an opportunity for groups to get seed funding to prove that their project can be successful, which then gives them the opportunity to go to central government and say, hey, we've done this successful thing, you should fund it. So we're always looking at that balance, and often, particularly in that seed funding space, it will take more than 1 year to do that. So there's some grants here that we're recommending that we funded last year, because this is kind of taking it to the next step.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, agree with all of that. I guess my concern is when I look at the assessment matrix, those comments that you're giving to me, which I entirely agree with, aren't really reflected in our assessment. So I just put to you, Mr. Chair, if these issues that the officers are responding around are important, maybe we need to look at our assessment matrix, because I consider them to be particularly important across the board.
Yep, okay then, just,
Thank you.
Christine, did you want to,
I was
take
just
it
going
on
to
board?
say, we have the assessment matrix, but as we also take on board, you know, all the research that we do and all the kind of expert knowledge and stuff like that, and we weigh it all up. Yeah.
Okay then, thank you. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the report and for the opportunity to go through the grants applications. But this is just another area where local boards are very much, better off than governing body, because they get the intensive workshops with officers to go through the applications. So all good, that's just how it is. But I did want to ask about the strategic relationships, because I do appreciate the flexibility when you get the applications for a grant and you think, actually, that could be a strategic relationship. My question is around how can that process be opened up to everybody, so it's not just those that you see, oh yeah, that could be one. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the policy sets out the criteria of what constitutes a strategic relationship. So so it wouldn't be, not every group would meet the criteria for it. They tend to be the stronger, the kind of the anchor organisations of their sector. But we haven't, it's not something that we have promoted a lot previously. So up until 2 years ago, this grant was 175,000, and the Community Development and Safety Committee at that time wanted to prioritise the project stuff rather than strategic relationships. The grant was increased by 120,000 2 years ago, so that opened up the opportunity to, well, this is the second time with that increased funding, so that's opened up the opportunity to look at it. Going forward, we'll be looking at an EOI process for groups to apply for that. We'll be making sure that groups are aware that that's an option.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, Councillor Hills and Simpson.
Kia ora. It was probably more for the benefit of Councillor Walker and anyone else who might not know the context from just the increase of, it was myself and Kathy and a couple others that asked and secured in the long-term plan about a $400,000 a year increase to these grants, which is awesome, but obviously we can do that again. Obviously we can do that again potentially in the long-term plan next year, but I think it's good to have the context that after 5 or 6 years of no increase, we increased it $400,000 a year for the events and regional grants. So I thought that it's really good and we can keep travelling that way, but I think it's good to know that it is quite a difference from a year and a half ago.
Did you know that? Did you know that? Yeah. Councillor Simpson.
It's quite good that my question follows on from this, because I think my question is around what oversight do the ratepayers have? We know what we're granting to, which organisations we're granting to and what for, but what oversight do ratepayers or the public have on the success of the grant and how it's been spent, and the success, therefore, that meets the objectives of the money in the first place?
Yeah, it's a good question. I know in the past with the Community Development and Safety Committee, we have had discussions with the chair about how we can show the committee the success of the grants that have been paid out. I think at one point we talked about maybe bringing some of the groups to present. We haven't done that, but it's certainly an option in the future, because I think letting ratepayers know needs to happen through this committee.
So, supplementary, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think that's a really good idea. We now have you and this committee for that, and it would, if we do that really well, it would take any increase to these grants probably easier because it's more transparent.
And just a comment to that, and you're right. I know that Councillor Casey's committee previously ended up going to our marae where the money was spent and just having a look at it. We also had in the previous committees opportunities where we got people who ended up getting the funds putting on a showcase So then our community, the councillors, Independent Māori Statutory Board, but people could see what result was of the funding they got. So no, taken on board again. Okay. Thank you. If there's no more questions, any comments? No more comments. It's been moved and seconded. I'll just before I put the recommendation, please note that Councillor Collins, that Councillor Collins has put in a conflict of interest. So I'll move the recommendation. All those in favour? Again.